So my name is Perry Hobson. I'm based in Breda in the Netherlands, and I've got two colleagues with me who are joining me from the Czech Republic and from Germany. So it's a very global end to the session today. Now, my background is very much international. I grew up here in the UK, and I've spent the last 30-odd years of my life living in other countries. So I moved from the UK to the US, to Hong Kong, to Australia, to Malaysia, and finally this year I got to the Netherlands. So I'm within a few kilometres of having done the full circumference in my career. So my background is very much in hospitality and tourism, hence all the travelling. But what I'm passionate about is about the change and innovation that we've seen. And what we've seen, obviously, has been this huge amount of digital disruption that's occurred. And many people argued that what was happening and that education was due to have that digital disruption. And of course, it came. And when it came in a hurry. And with COVID, we saw this tremendous, dramatic change to our societies, to our lives. It feels like only yesterday. And it was, and it's still going on. We're not out of it yet. But the reality for me as an educator in tourism was my world stopped. The reality for me as an educator was my world stopped. And not only that, it emptied our lecture theatres. It drove us literally online. I remember having a conversation literally in January before COVID started, saying we needed to do more stuff online. I was working for a private university in Malaysia, and one of my colleagues said to me, "Perry, that's not what parents and students are paying for." 2 months later, it was the only thing they were paying for. And the reality was, as you all know, was that we did the impossible. We made a massive leap from many of us doing nothing online to being fully online. But the question, as we'll pick up with our panel today, was, has so many institutions got stuck there? We did an emergency. We did things very quickly. But have we got ourselves now in a rut? How are we going to move on? And it was interesting listening to the last presentation to hear about what students are saying. Was in fact, yes, they want to get back in the classroom, but they expect more stuff online. Now, of course, the reality was that both students and staff went online, and they're not going to give that up. Once you've had access to all those things, 24/7, the recorded lectures, they're not going to go back to being able to sit in a very uncomfortable classroom on a hard seat in something that wasn't very interactive in the first place. They're used to being connected with computers, by iPads, by phones, by their watches. They're not suddenly going to go, gee, I want to go back to how it was. Now, as we look around the world, we also have to see how that the patterns of how digital adoption have changed. And we also have to understand in many parts of the world, it's very different from the world that you and I are living in. Now, I make that point because during the pandemic, I was doing a lot of work working across different countries in Southeast Asia. And what I became fascinated with was the challenges that this presents us with. So I'm going to share one chart with you, which some people might find a little bit surprising. Because let me ask you this question. Who spends the most time online? Who do you think spends the most time online? Where would be the number one country you would pick in the world for spending the most time online? Well, it's not in Europe, it's not in North America, it's not in South America. Number one in the world is, interestingly, the Philippines. They spend nearly 11 hours online a day. The UK clocks a very slow, it's only 6 hours and 26 minutes. The Japanese are on and off very quickly, 1 hour and 45 minutes. Now, what we see is we can unpack that data, and I could give you even more information about how much of this is social media time as well. And the Filipinos do about 6 hours. And I wouldn't have believed it had I not done various classes in the Philippines where we asked everyone to stand up and to say how many friends they had on Facebook. We asked them to sit down if they had 150 or less friends. I was the only person to sit down. We got to 1,000, we got to 2,000, we got to 3,000, we got to 4,000. At 5,000, I still had 6 or 7 students still standing. We repeated this at 4 different universities. So we have to also understand how much this has changed with what's kind of happened around the world. Now, the reality for most universities is that most of us as academics, and I count myself as an academic, were traditional bookheads. We lived in a walled garden. I live on my campus, I have my office, I have my students. I would go in to see them. If you wanted to come and hear my lecture, that wasn't going to happen unless you were registered at my university. If you want to read my research, that's no problem. I'll happily give you access to my research because my promotion is based on it. My H-index, my citations. Remember, you don't pay the university to read my research, you pay a publisher, but never mind. But you would never come to hear me. Many students would be lucky to get 1, maybe 2, at best, guest lectures a year. Wow. And suddenly, that's now all changed. Our professor has been digitalized. I can be anywhere at any time on the planet. I'm recorded and digitalized. My world has had to change. And for many academics, they had to literally do that overnight. The question is going to be, where will that drive us next? Because when I was growing up in Reigate in Surrey, which is my home, the University of Surrey is literally 15 minutes away. The rule for a faculty member at the University of Surrey was you had to live within a 30-mile radius or no job. Now, 30 miles, 300 miles? Do you need to be 3,000 miles? You could be anywhere on the planet. And that has implications for universities to think about where your staff should be. Where would they be? So when we start to look ahead, we've not only got to think about what's the student of tomorrow going to be like, and we heard on the last panel how their expectations are changing. We've also got to think about how are we going to prepare our staff for this new world. Because once you go away from the walled garden, you open up incredible opportunities to connect with students in other parts of the world on a daily basis. So last year, I was asked to run a new course on contemporary issues. I said, great. They said, don't worry, Perry, when you start the course, there's a team of people. Funnily enough, there was a team of 3, then there was a team of 2, and then there was just me. My decision was to have it globally taught. I brought in 17 guest professors from around the world. So my view of how this is going to work out is that for each discipline, we're going to have to think about this very hard. My area is tourism. How am I going to teach tourism in the future may be very different from how I'm teaching it or have been teaching it. I've got 650 students this week on field trips. I maxed out our university credit card, 125,000 euros to get them all to go. Wow. Are there other ways that we can do this? And if it's not through that technology, what will new augmented technologies bring? So we've not got to think of now, but really think of this in the future, because obviously we get professors with us for a very long time. So how are we going to build them? So it won't just be adopting the technologies we've got today, it's going to be thinking about how we can adopt the technologies of tomorrow. And finding new ways and innovative ways to present knowledge and to connect students. So we talk a lot about digital nomads. Is this the professor of tomorrow, working at 6 universities, sitting by his swimming pool at home? Quite possibly. In fact, it's probably more than likely that will be the case. Because once we network people around the world, that gives universities the opportunity to work together and to collaborate, to bring together alliances and networks so that they can pull that technology and connectivity together. So working with colleagues and students around the world is going to be the emerging pattern we'd like to see. So the university campus and building, we now have to think about this differently. When I was doing my undergraduate degree, which was down in Oxford Brookes, we had the big university down the road. You go and visit any of those colleges and there's one door in. And the question always was that to keep the students locked in or the other people locked out? We've broken down those walls. So whether this is going to be Professor Cyborg of the future, I don't know. But what I do think is going to happen in the immediate term is going to be using a lot better connectivity to connect globally with people and with students. And this is going to be the future that we are going to see. So building a global university is not about a building. That's not what this is going to be about. Whether it will be in the metaverse or whatever else we want to call it, I don't know. But in the meantime, what I do see us doing is universities sharing those resources. We collaborate on research, we've collaborated on student exchange. What other things can we collaborate and build on? And it's talking about those collaborations and building those networks that is going to be so important. Now, for me, this gives us the opportunity now for us to hear from our colleagues who I've invited along to join us on this panel today, to talk about the interesting side and the things that they have been involved in and engaged in during COVID. So to start with, I'd like to introduce Renáta. Renáta is joining us from the University of Ostrava in the Czech Republic. And the work she has been doing there has been really, I think, quite inspiring for me. And so, Renáta, perhaps you'd like to start with telling us a little bit about the journey that the University of Ostrava has been on in terms of how you've digitalized, internationalized, and collaborated.
Okay, right. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for coming this afternoon. So, I'm sorry, it's doesn't seem to be sharing on the screen. Okay, right, here it is. So This is what I want to show you, where I come from. I teach at the University of Ostrava, which is in the Czech Republic, and we are here very close to the Slovak and Polish borders, so right the other side from Prague of the Czech Republic. And we are just middle-sized European university with over 8,500 students. So the emergency online teaching was a real challenge. We were caught in 2020 lockdown with e-learning materials in PDF files from the previous years. Moodle was used, but more as a storage space and as task management, not very much for interaction with students. MS Teams were there, but nobody almost knew about that. Multimedia Studio was open, but actually lacked demand. Yeah, professors didn't care much. And there's also this common myth in the Czech Republic, and I think it's also in other countries, that all academics can teach well, and a good researcher is automatically a good teacher. So the situation, even though technologies were there and were even used, was still very much analog. So when the lockdown was finishing, I mean the first one in the spring of 2020, we actually asked our students how satisfied they were with the first emergency online experience. And these are the results. Of course, it was a long questionnaire, so I've chosen just 2 slides, 2 questions. One was very interesting for us because it shows the differences, the discrepancy between what students expected and what teachers were, happy to do. So you can see that the differences. The blue line is always what teachers used most in emergency online teaching, and the red lines show what students would like to have at their disposal in online teaching and learning. So the biggest difference in these expectations is with videos and podcasts. Teachers were more happy with rather static materials like PowerPoint presentations or digitalized texts, whereas students expect something that's more live, that's closer to real life, like interviews or videos. But we should not be that harsh to academics, because when we asked academics what they thought about this first lockdown experience, it actually showed that many of them would like to learn more. So the first line, you can see it's UO, it's University of Ostrava. So the university as a whole, it was more than 1/3 of academics that would like to be trained in digital teaching skills. And this answer actually ran across different age groups and levels of seniority. So even teachers with 26 plus years of teaching were actually excited about having digital teaching classes or trainings. So what we did at the university, where I am responsible for internationalization currently, we tried to use the momentum to move on from emergency online teaching to blended formats in the curriculum. So to make the most of this difficult and unwanted, undesired experience of COVID. We've had a hard time, and we're still working on it, to explain in the first place that emergency online teaching is not the same as the planned online teaching. What helps here a lot is to actually go for advice to countries and universities that had experiences with online teaching long before COVID for different reasons. With Canada and Australia, it's of course the geography. When you want to make education accessible to people living across the country, you need more distance offers. So we learned from them. And also what proved very useful is to trying to find one's feet in the new reality together. So what's extremely beneficial is having different kinds of partnerships, being parts of alliances and networks. And the number one alliance for us is our university, European University Alliance. We call NEOLAIA because NEO, it means it's an alliance of young, relatively young universities. That's why the name. On the other hand, it's also kind of tongue twister sometimes to pronounce it. So we shared experiences locally and globally, and now we are working on a new educational framework and also academic support scheme, because there's much more focus now on teaching skills than we experienced before. We also learned that participative approaches that we knew from management theories actually worked very well in these extreme conditions of the pandemic. And we are building professional learning communities. And also we see the impact on internationalization, that actually we should make it more resilient, that during pandemic when the physical mobility more or less stops, so it's very limited, it should not be the only thing how to provide students with international experience. So especially virtual online courses that are based on interaction. So it is COIL, this, collaborative online international learning helps a lot. When we asked students in another survey later on, the survey started in May 2021, and the focus this time was on virtual mobility. This time it was not only University of Ostrava, but it was 24 Czech higher education institutions. So actually the results are based on the answers of almost 7,000 students in the Czech Republic, including international students studying in the Czech Republic. And the interesting thing was that we appreciated that even though they were still right at the end of the lockdown period in May 2021, after online semester, still there's 1/3 or more that would like to experience virtual mobility, and that's another more than 1/3 that would at least consider it. So that's something we should count with. And also another question I would like to share with you was what motivated them actually to decide so, to answer that virtual mobility would be an option for them. And here, if you just focus on the blue and red color, which says that this is a highly motivating factor, you see that the highest motivation for virtual mobility is the opportunity of combining virtual mobility with the study of their home university. And the second longest line, blue and red in combination, is the possibility of combining work at the place of their residence with virtual mobility. So I think it clearly shows that virtual mobility would be welcome, but not as a replacement for physical contact, but as a great complement to what they find to be the core of their studies. And one more interesting answer for us was what kind of formats they would appreciate in the virtual space. Actually, it's not just the study, the regular study at an international university abroad, but it's shorter mobility, so complementary intensive courses, for example, courses of virtual soft skills, And students were even flexible enough that they would also appreciate virtual internships. So there's this virtual work or research placement is also seen as something that students would appreciate as a job experience in the virtual space, which is one of the job spaces, the workspaces nowadays. So if you want to have quality virtual mobility and virtual exchanges, you need good partners. So what we find is really great if you have these partnerships networks. So we have one, we call this Neolai I mentioned before. It's 9 European universities that try to join their potential to actually meet the different kinds of global challenges in some kind of synergy. So it's close cooperation in research, it's sharing tools and building, shared teams. It's also the expertise you can offer to students across Neolaya. And it's of course also mobility, including quality and different formats of quality virtual mobility and language and culture exchanges and so on. So actually, we think that the combination of quality virtual mobility, so really interaction online, not like passive listening or watching something, combined with the physical mobility could help us build something that's called internationalization for all. Just one example we've just designed in this Neolaya Alliance is Focus Academy, which is a set of collaborative online international courses that respond to different global challenges like digitalization or diversity and inclusion or global health or One Health trend. And what is exciting about it is that you don't, rely only on one university when building the course, but you can bring together experts in the field from several universities or all the 9, and you can then open the courses for all the universities across the alliance. So what we've learned most, I would say, of this period of lockdowns is that getting connected is kind of the most important thing. It's always a bit better when it's, on site, but it can work very effectively also online. So I think for the rise of this digital professor, I think it's important that he or she and the students with them can still enjoy the ground under their feet. So thank you for sharing this with me.
Thank you, Renáta, for that. And I think it was an interesting point you just made there about the connectivity that the academic staff have now got between the universities. So they're creating content and delivering across 9 universities. And you've now got academics working across those universities. Now, before COVID, I was struggling to get 2 lecturers in the same school, in the same university, to cooperate. They wouldn't even agree on anything. So to be able to start to network staff across different institutions in different countries has been a huge step forward, because that is not easy. It really is a very difficult thing to do. And to see that the way that COVID, having taken us online, has now started opening up those doors. And do you think you're going to see a lot more of this happening now?
I'm persuaded so. Actually, we've been working on the project of the Alliance since 2019. Right. And we met last before COVID 2020, and then we met in November 2021. So without online cooperation, we would just disappear. But we've learned a lot, actually, to cooperate online. So I think a lot is going to happen, even in research collaboration online, also with the different methodologies that use digitalization in the methods and presenting results,
So we're now going to turn to Mieke, who's joining us, come all the way from Bielefeld in Germany. And, they're also part of the Neolaya network. And, as we were organising our panel today, we wanted to talk more about the focus being from students. But now let's look at some of the data that's coming from the staff and the sort of things that the staff are telling us about how they're going online and what that focus has been. So over to you, Mieke.
Thank you, Perry. I come from Bielefeld University, and Bielefeld is a city between Hanover and Cologne in the middle of Germany. And Bielefeld University has near to 24 students, including 2,000 international students. So if we look at teaching and learning today, the last 2 years led us to an increase of digital teaching and learning. And I think there are lower barriers for teachers for digital teaching and for the digital professor. But I think also we had a spotlight on teaching and learning, and the teachers had to reflect about their teaching. So it was not so easy to switch the normal course into an online course. They had to reflect about what is the success of learning for the students. And a digital teacher today is less a lecturer than a facilitator of teaching and learning. So he has or she has to look how to interact, how to get the students in interaction, and how to build working groups and collaboration between students. And so I think we have really a good situation for teaching and learning and to get to new models, I think. And we did many experiences, and one of the experiences in Bielefeld University was in the last semester the hybrid scenarios. So really the synchronous hybrid scenarios, one part of the students on site and one part of the students at home on their own devices. And more than 40% of the teachers made these experiences. And it's a little bit amazing, but there was a high satisfaction rate also with the interaction in synchronous hybrid courses. We made this synchronous hybrid courses with Zoom rooms and D10s. And I think the satisfaction, the reason of the satisfaction is because before we had the fully remote situation, and now there was the possibility to interact in the classroom. So it's better than the situation in the COVID before. And the reason why we have also put many euros in our infrastructure for hybrid formats was that it is a transition, the hybrid situation, between remote and on-site. And now we use this hybrid formats because of the scalability in the pandemic situation. But I think that the hybrid is also really a future perspective for collaboration, for international collaboration, and also for inclusion. So if you ask the teachers, they are satisfied with the situation now and the moment, but if you ask them what is their future perspective, they imagine that they want to go back to the campus. So the most of the teachers want to teach on site. They could also imagine blended learning formats with asynchronous digital elements and on site, and they can also imagine synchronous hybrid formats, but it's depending very much on the disciplines. So the medicine is very, want to go with synchronous hybrid formats, but if you ask the mathematics or the natural sciences, they want to go back to the campus. They want to have their blackboard. They don't even need a whiteboard. They want to be in the classroom with the students, and they want to have the interaction. They also use digital formats. That's not the problem. They want to have simulations and a chemistry, but they also want to be on the campus. And the students also want. But in the students, it's I think that half of the students want to stay online and want to have the flexibility and want to learn also at home or otherwhere. But the half of the students want to come back, and it's especially the natural sciences. So also for the assessment and exams, teachers can imagine that there are digital forms of exams, especially digital oral exams or digital exams in presence with tablets. Yeah, as Renáta mentioned, I fully agree that there are different expectations of students and teachers. The students want online tutorials, they want videos, and they want the materials digital. They want to learn in their own speed, they want to learn at home, and the teachers don't want that. They also want that a little bit, but they want and use the digital tools for peer review groups, for working groups, for simulations, and for these reasons. So if you ask for the opportunities, Renáta mentioned that digitalization give us the chance to collaborate international in our Neo-Layer Alliance, that teachers can go to other universities, that students have the possibility for virtual mobility. But there are also some challenges, I think. And one of the challenges is the need for learning spaces. We have to think about spaces in the university, and Perry mentioned that the global university is a virtual space, but we have also think about the real spaces. And this afternoon, the Staffordshire University, was it, I think, also created new rooms, and we don't have to think only in rooms for teaching and learning. We have to create spaces where the students can watch together videos or collaborate with each other. This is a room in the University for Technique, Sciences and Arts in Cologne. And we have to think about this. And then another challenge is that we have to help the students how to become a digital learner. They need a high level of self-regulation in the digital situation, motivation, and their need competencies for online settings. So we have to promote these competencies. And also for the digital professor, what does the work of a digital professor look like in the future? If you are teaching in the morning in Bielefeld and in the evening in London and tomorrow in Ostrava, and our teachers said that with the increase of possibilities is also an increase of workload. So we have to look for the well-being of students and of staff. I think it's a very important challenge for us in the universities. And the last point I want to mention is that the chance for collaboration. This is really the important point, I think, the collaboration in our alliance, or the collaboration between teachers and students in the universities, cross universities, and also international. And we have also a chance if we open our materials. I think in the moment there's no really a culture of sharing between teachers. It's also, Perry mentioned that in the same department, teachers not really collaborate and talk about, oh, what do you have done in your lecture this morning? So this is not a theme. And I think we have to open this a little bit, also with open educational resources, to distribute our materials and to reuse it and to have a more open strategy. Yeah, and I think the challenge is that we have to develop a culture of sharing a little bit, and it's a really difficult task. But the benefit is there. We can collaborate and to improve the quality of teaching and learning. Yeah, thank you.
And I mean, thank you so much for sharing that, because I think what we're going to start seeing is a lot more collaboration through those networks, through virtual mobility. So I recently moved to the Netherlands, and I discovered that already we've reorganized our courses, so every student has to do a minor in their final year. That minor can be done within our university. It can be done in another academy in our university. It can be done in any other university in the Netherlands, or it can be done anywhere in the world. So again, it's about building the systems in. The challenge is having enough partners for us to work with who have been able to offer all that. So it's about having the desire, it's about having the structures, but it's importantly about being able to have the collaboration and building that trust with other institutions. That doesn't happen easily. And dare I say, COVID, despite how much we've hated the last couple of years, has really spurred on a whole lot of opportunities for us to think differently. Because as I showed in my slide, we had to jump from what was impossible to being possible, because we had to keep going. And so people who'd never done anything or cooperated overseas did it. I was teaching students in Austria from Malaysia, but the students couldn't even get to Austria, so they were across 15 time zones. So yes, my day was trying to figure out how to do that. But that also brought together a whole range of networks for me with other people, working collaboratively. I was teaching the course with a guy in Africa, a guy in Austria, and myself sitting in Malaysia. So we were forced, normally we taught at different times, but when we went online, we had to work together. And that brought a whole lot of collaboration. My partner, when I was living in Malaysia at Sunway University, was the University of Lancaster. They used to send out staff every so often. It was a bit of a holiday, dare I say. That then changed when they went online. We actually had more connectivity between their staff and our students online than we ever had in person. So I think what we've seen is that the rise of the digital professor has started. It's going to go through some interesting steps, and thank you both so much for sharing. So just as we've got a couple of minutes to the end, let me just ask you a couple of questions, but very quickly on the first one of these. Where do you think this will go next? What will be the next steps that you see in Ostrava and Bielefeld? Where do you see this going next?
Well, for us, probably the most important thing is what I mentioned in one of the slides, the educational framework. So actually focusing more on teaching, not generally the quality of teaching, but really how teaching is done. We've been discussing for years that we have the student-centered approach and competence-based models, but we've actually never checked if it's really done. And I think the importance of having knowledge and skills has grown. And at the same time, I think the internationalization will develop, in fact, more smoothly in a way than before, because people really feel not just that we should be international and should have partners abroad, but that you feel the need that it can actually really help. That you don't need to invent things that were invented somewhere else. Or if you try new things, you can actually also use the experiences with these things abroad. So it actually helps you to really go forward much more smoothly and swiftly. So I hope it looks like that definitely now, and we are fortunately after lockdown periods. So I think this is what we've gained, and this is what is developing, and hopefully will develop still.
No, well, I think given what I've heard and given what we've heard at the show over the last day or 2 days, there's going to be a lot of ways of different collaboration going forward. Mieke, just to finish off, where do you think your next steps will be?
The next step, I think, is we have now a good infrastructure and experiences, and now we have once more to think about good didactic formats and a good mix between digital and on campus. And how could we improve also the campus life? What can we do that the students want to come back? That they want to only stay at home. What is the advantage to be on the campus? Why we are sitting here and not talking on Zoom, everybody. So this is what the colleague from the higher education, Times Higher Education mentioned. So we have to get a good mix, and this is the next step. And it's very difficult, I think, to do this in collaboration with teachers and students.
And I think that's where we'll leave it today, because I think that's a great question in our minds to go away from. 2 years ago, we wouldn't have been asking ourselves, why do we need to get students to come back onto the campus? So it's been a huge transformation that we're even asking that question and to get that blend right going forward. So thank you very much for joining us this afternoon. We hope you've enjoyed Better Ahead by Bett and the show. There's been some really interesting presentations through today that I hope have stimulated your thought. So please join us for tomorrow. Thank you very much to our panelists. Mieke and Renáta, thank you so much for coming all the way to the UK to join us. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you very much.